I arrived at my bookshop with a handwritten diary in one hand and cookies in the other, ready to see my newborn granddaughter for the first time. But they told me I wasn't on the guest list. They didn't know that I had built the very floor they were standing on, and that I never forget betrayal, especially the kind that comes with herbal tea and fake smiles. Pour yourself some tea and make yourself comfortable, because now you're going to hear a thrilling story about betrayal and how the offender paid dearly for it. I'm 67, recently promoted to Nana, and let me tell you I was over the moon about it. My son Dylan, my sweet boy who used to try and dig holes to china in our backyard with a plastic shovel, just became a dad. His wife Sabrina gave birth to little Lucy about a month ago. And you'd think becoming a grandmother would be all warm baby blankets and family photos. Well, buckle in. Now before I dive into this tale of betrayal, let me just say, I am not one for drama. I'm not. I run a chain of bookstores, for goodness sake. Harper & Pages, if you've heard of it. Big blue awning, creaky wooden floors, and the smell of old paper that hits you like a hug from an old friend. I inherited the whole shebang from my late husband, Frank, who believed that stories could solve most problems and that tea should always be served with biscuits. We built it together, then I ran it on my own. It's not just a business, it's a legacy. It's ours. So you can imagine how proud I was when Dylan and Sabrina decided to host baby Lucy's first story hour right at our flagship store. It wasn't a public event, not a big marketing thing, just a cozy little gathering. A chance to introduce Lucy to the people who made this place feel like home. The longtime clerks, the book club regulars, a few family members. I'd spent the week before making a hand-bound journal for her. Took me hours. The cover was pressed leather, deep burgundy with gold lettering. Inside were family stories, some funny, some sweet, some a little embarrassing, and letters written just for Lucy to read someday when she's older and wondering where she came from. It was meant to be something special. My way of saying you're part of something bigger. Well, I show up to the store a few minutes early, journal in hand, wearing my best cardigan, the cashmere one with the pearl buttons that Frank always said made me look dangerously expensive. I even brought cookies. Not store-bought, real cookies. Butterscotch pecan. The kind Dylan used to sneak from the tin before they cooled. I'm walking up the steps, already misty-eyed just thinking about meeting my granddaughter in this space I love so much, and then bam! I'm stopped at the front door by a young man I don't recognize. Nice enough looking fellow, had one of our new name tags on. I think his name was Brad or Brent. Doesn't matter. He looked nervous, like he'd rather be stocking shelves than telling a sweet old woman she wasn't welcome. "Ma'am," he said, "ma'am. I'm really sorry, but I've been told this event is private. Only immediate family allowed." Now I chuckled. Truly, I thought he was joking. I said, "Sweetheart, I am immediate family. I'm Lucy's grandmother." I held up the journal. I even made her a little something. He blinked at me, shuffled his feet. "It's just," Mrs. Sabrina said, "to only let in people from her list. I don't see your name here. I'm really sorry." Well, let me tell you, I've been through some things in life. I've buried a husband, balanced checkbooks to the penny, and once rewired a lamp using only YouTube and common sense. But nothing prepared me for the hollow thud in my chest when I realized he wasn't joking. "Is Dylan inside?" I asked, still hoping this was some sort of misunderstanding. A scheduling mix-up. A missed text. He wouldn't look me in the eye. "Yes, ma'am." Just then I glanced through the big storefront window. There was Sabrina, holding Lucy like a little porcelain doll, beaming from ear to ear. Around her were people I didn't recognize. Her family, probably. Well-dressed, sipping fancy tea from our reading room china. Laughing. Posing for photos under the Welcome Baby Lucy banner we'd made last week. The banner I helped hang. I didn't see a single person from my side of the family. Not one. And Dylan? He was standing behind Sabrina, holding a tray of cookies I knew weren't mine. Now I'm not one to cause a scene, especially not in my own bookstore. I straightened my back, gave that poor nervous clerk a nod and said, "All right, dear. Thank you." I handed him the journal. "Make sure she gets this, would you?" And I turned around and walked out, my heels clicking on the hardwood like punctuation marks to a sentence I hadn't expected to write. I didn't hear from Dylan that day. Not a text. Not a call. Not even a, "Hey mom, sorry about that mix-up at the door." I waited. I figured maybe he'd realize what had happened. Maybe he'd call once they got home and Lucy was down for a nap. Nothing. Just silence. Instead, the next morning, while sipping my coffee and nursing a lump the size of Texas in my throat, I opened up my tablet and saw it. A photo front and center on Sabrina's page. There was little Lucy, nestled in Sabrina's arms, right there in my reading room, under the Welcome Baby Lucy banner. Sabrina's caption? Lucy's first story time with the people who matter most. Well, I'll be honest with you. That one hit like a brick through stained glass. I stared at that photo until the screen dimmed. Then I sat in the reading chair Dylan gave me for Christmas the year he started college. Deep green velvet with brass legs, practically a throne for a bookworm like me, and I cried. I mean the kind of cry you don't plan for. The one that comes out of your ribs, not your eyes. I clutched that hand-bound journal like it could explain to me what just happened. After I got it out of my system and dabbed my face with a napkin from the cookie tin, because tissues weren't handy and the cookies were already gone, I started thinking, not just about the event but about the everything leading up to it. It hadn't started with Lucy. I remembered how our Christmas mornings used to look. Dylan and I would be up at dawn baking cinnamon rolls like his dad used to. We'd wear matching flannel pajama bottoms, mine from Elf Bean, his from whatever discount rack he could find, and laugh over spilled flour and lopsided icing. Then after Frank passed, it became our tradition. Just the two of us holding on to something warm and familiar. Then Sabrina entered the picture. That first Christmas she suggested they do their own thing. I was invited for Christmas Eve dinner instead. She called it cozy and intimate. It was fine, I guess, but it felt more like a dress rehearsal than the real show. The next year, Christmas Eve turned into, oh, we'll drop by after lunch, which became a 20-minute stopover with a gluten-free fruitcake and no time for tea. Dylan's weekly calls, the ones that used to come every Sunday like clockwork, began to taper off too. First he was busy, then he was tired, then, I'll call you tomorrow, Mom, which rarely turned into tomorrow. Then there was the wedding. That should have been my red flag flapping in the wind, but I didn't want to see it. Sabrina said they wanted something small and meaningful. And sure, that's their right. But I was gently told my guest list, old neighbors, my bridge club ladies, Margaret from book club, was too much. I found out later that Sabrina's coworkers, her yoga instructor, and even her hairstylist got invites. Dylan's childhood friends? Not one. Not even Peter, who once broke his wrist falling off our porch trying to sneak Dylan back home after curfew. He was practically family. But I swallowed it, smiled through it. I didn't want to be that mother-in-law, the one who nitpicks and nags and gets quietly disinvited from things. I told myself this was them growing up, finding their own rhythm. Looking back now, I see it wasn't just a new rhythm. It was a carefully choreographed dance, one that slowly moved me out of the frame. And the saddest part? I let it happen, one small compromise at a time. I've never considered myself nosy. Curious, sure. Observant, absolutely. But nose in other people's business? That's not how I was raised. That said, I was an editor before I took over the bookstores, and let me tell you, once you've spent 15 years catching typos, spotting plot holes, and gently breaking it to hopeful authors that their mystery thriller needs a mystery and a thrill, you learn how to read between the lines. So when things started feeling off, I didn't shout. I just opened my metaphorical red pen, started simple. Quiet questions. Soft touches. I called up my old friend Penelope, who used to run HR back when we only had 3 stores and a spreadsheet that crashed if you sneezed near it. Pen's retired now, living in Arizona where it's always sunny, and her husband finally learned to cook. But she still had a few industry contacts. I asked if she could find anything about Sabrina's work history, just to satisfy my own nagging feeling that something didn't quite line up. Now, Sabrina always talked a big game. Degrees in communications, internships at publishing houses, consulting work for literary nonprofits. I once asked her what exactly she did during her consulting, and she told me she helped curate the messaging of emerging narratives. I nodded politely and immediately wrote that one down to look up later. Still don't know what it means. Well, Penelope called back a week later, sounding more amused than shocked. Ellie, she said, your daughter-in-law's resume is a work of fiction. And not a particularly well-written one. Turns out the degree? Never completed. The university had a record of her attending for 2 semesters but nothing more. As for the prestigious publishing internships, non-existent. She had worked retail though. Nordstrom for a bit. Macy's before that. A boutique shop where she left abruptly, which is HR speak for something went sideways. The consulting work? A lifestyle blog about productivity and essential oils. 6 months of posts, most of which were just reworded advice from other sites, dressed up in pastel fonts. That might have been enough for most people, but I wanted the whole story. So I called Jenna, a meticulous researcher I'd worked with years ago on an anthology about women in early American literature. If anyone could get the tea without spilling it, it was Jenna. She went deeper. Social media, old email trails, even obscure mentions on alumni forums. What she found wasn't criminal, but it raised the hair on my arms. Sabrina had a habit of getting close to certain clients. Older women, usually, often well-to-do and a bit lonely. At Nordstrom, she befriended a widow who ended up gifting her a designer handbag collection worth thousands. At the boutique, she offered to help out an elderly customer whose daughter lived out of state. That woman rewrote her will shortly before passing. Now, I'm not accusing anyone of anything, but if it quacks and walks like a duck, well, it ain't a hummingbird. By the time Jenna was done, a clearer picture had emerged. Sabrina wasn't just ambitious. She was strategic. The jobs weren't stepping stones, they were auditions. Every relationship, every resume line, every carefully curated photo of her sipping a chai latte in a sunlit window. It was all part of a carefully written character arc. She hadn't married Dylan because they were star-crossed lovers who locked eyes over a copy of The Great Gatsby. She positioned herself for the role like someone auditioning for a lead in a family drama, with a generous inheritance and a prestigious surname. And that's when I knew. She didn't just want to be part of the family. She wanted to own the story. Confrontation isn't really my style. Not anymore anyway. In my younger days, I had a sharper tongue and faster reflexes, but I've found that most messes are better handled with a steady hand and a long memory. And frankly, someone had to act like the adult in this situation. Sabrina expected me to raise a fuss, wave some finger 'cause a scene. But I didn't give her that satisfaction. Instead, I poured myself a fresh cup of tea, called my lawyer, and started writing a different kind of ending to this story. Now my attorney Miriam has been with me through thick and thin. She helped me negotiate the building lease when we opened the second Harper and Page's location, and she's got the patience of a saint with the spine of a rhinoceros. I sat down across from her, pulled out my leather folder. I always bring a folder. It lets people know you mean business, and said, I need to update the family trust. We worked through it together page by page. I didn't cut Dylan out, he's my son and I do love him, even if his head's been stuffed with fairy dust lately. But I made it so neither he nor Sabrina could access the real money unless certain benchmarks were met. Things like Lucy's college tuition, or legitimate publishing projects tied to Harper and Page's. Not vacations to Tuscany or that bizarre eco-retreat Sabrina mentioned last Thanksgiving. More importantly, I transferred voting control of the company to a board of trustees. These were old friends of mine from my editorial days, women who'd worked in publishing back when typewriters still ruled and you had to really earn your byline. Smart, fair, and too wise to be charmed by pastel Instagram filters or big talk about branding potential. They would guard the soul of our company like it was their grandmother's cast iron skillet. With that handled, I turned my attention to Dylan. Now, if you're a mother, you don't guilt your kids into coming back. You love them there. So I started small. I mailed him a first edition of Where the Red Fern Grows, the very same book he begged me to read every night for a week when he was 9. Inside, I tucked a handwritten note. Remember how you cried at the ending? You've always had the biggest heart. No lecture. Just love. A few days later, I sent one of his father's old bookmarks, brass shaped like a feather, polished until it gleamed. Frank used to leave it in whichever biography he was reading at the time. With it, I included a short note about how proud his father would have been to see him becoming a dad. I didn't hear back right away. That's fine. Love isn't a boomerang, it doesn't have to come back instantly to mean something. But slowly the wind shifted. I got a text one morning. Thanks for the book, Mom. I forgot how good it was. Then another the next week. Lucy smiled for the first time today. Thought you'd want to know. It wasn't a flood. It wasn't an apology. But it was a start. And I knew then, if I was patient, if I was careful, my son might just find his way back. Once I'd set things in motion with the trust and the trustees, I decided it was time to push the envelope just a little. Nothing dramatic, just a gentle nudge in the direction of truth. I knew if I came right out and accused Sabrina of anything, Dylan would dig in like a mule in wet cement. But if he could see the cracks for himself, well, that would be a different story altogether. Now, Dylan volunteers with the local literacy charity. He started years ago, tutoring at-risk teens in writing and reading comprehension. It's one of the few things he kept doing after he met Sabrina. And I knew the group adored him. He's got a knack with kids just like his father. So I made a donation. A generous one. Enough to fund an entire summer reading program and throw a proper spring gala. I floated the idea to the board that they honor Dylan at the event. "He's been a pillar of your volunteer team," I said sweetly. "It might mean a lot to his family, especially with the new baby." They were thrilled. Within days, the invitation was formalized. I made sure they called him directly and extended the invite to his entire household. No middlemen, no chances for things to get lost in translation. It was going to be a lovely evening. Cocktail attire. Catered hors d'oeuvres. A modest but meaningful program. Nothing flashy, just a heartfelt celebration of community literacy and the people behind it. I even bought a new dress, a deep plum number with a subtle shimmer that said, "I still know how to turn a head, even if I need orthopedic shoes to do it." 2 days before the gala, my phone rang. Dylan's name lit up on the screen. "Hey, Mom." He started, and I could already hear the hesitation in his voice. "We won't be able to make it. Sabrina says Lucy's got a cold. We don't want to risk bringing her out like that." I kept my voice soft. "Oh, I understand, sweetheart. Lucy's health comes first, of course." But I knew better. That very morning, Alma, the children's librarian at the downtown branch and one of my oldest book club friends, called me. She was still chuckling when she shared it. "You'll never guess who I saw at the park," she said. "Sabrina and Lucy, out for a walk bundled up in that darling yellow pram. Look like a postcard. So no fever, no runny nose, no emergency pediatric visits. Just a well-timed excuse." Now, I don't get jealous often, but something about Sabrina treating my son's moment of recognition like an inconvenience, it rubbed me the wrong way. This wasn't about germs or RSV season. This was about control. Sabrina didn't want Dylan in a room full of people who might see past her carefully polished image. People who knew me, who might start asking questions if the dots didn't connect. She was dodging the crowd. Not for Lucy's sake, for her own. Still, I bit my tongue and smiled into the phone. "Maybe next year," I said. "I'm sure the gala will still be lovely." And it was. But it wasn't the missed evening that stuck with me. It was the realization. Sabrina didn't want anyone else writing the story of our family. Especially not me. Sabrina invited me to lunch. That's how she phrased it. Invited. Like she was doing me a favor, not summoning me for what I already suspected was going to be a monologue in a cardigan. She picked one of those minimalist cafes where the chairs are just for decoration and the portions come on wooden boards instead of plates. You know, the kind where the menu looks like someone forgot to finish typing. She showed up 10 minutes late, wearing a beige pantsuit and glossy lip balm, and carrying a leather tote the size of a suitcase. She looked like she was about to pitch a screenplay. I was wearing my Wednesday cardigan and a pin that said Books Before Boys. It was a gift from the store's YA section and seemed appropriate. We hugged sort of and sat. She ordered a beet juice with some kind of turmeric foam on top. I stuck with tea. And then right on cue she took a deep breath and launched into it. "Eleanor," she began, with that rehearsed tone people use before breaking up or pitching a pyramid scheme, "I think it's time we talk about boundaries." "Oh, do you?" I wanted to say. But I kept my face as neutral as an unopened envelope. She had a whole list. No unannounced visits. No unsupervised time with Lucy. All gifts had to be approved ahead of time. "We're trying to be intentional with our parenting," she said, like it was a slogan she'd read off a blog. I nodded slowly. "I see. And we'd appreciate it if family stories and photos were clear before being shared. We want to control Lucy's narrative." I had to pause at that one. Narrative? I asked, amused. You know, what she hears about her past, our values, what we prioritize. Ah, I said, taking a sip of tea. Like how she'll remember her Nana wasn't allowed to give her a handmade journal? That got a slight twitch out of her left eye. Sabrina leaned in, elbows on the table like we were co-conspirators. We just want a peaceful environment. Of course, I replied, reaching into my tote bag. And I think you're going to want to see this. I placed a folder on the table, the kind with brass fasteners. Nothing dramatic, just the kind you'd use for book drafts or quiet truths. Sabrina hesitated, but curiosity is a funny thing, even in the most polished of people. Inside, photos of her leaving the office of a known estate lawyer. Notes on her fabricated credentials. No marketing degree. No publishing house internships. A report from an old publishing contact of mine detailing how Sabrina tried to use our family name to get herself a book deal with a vanity press. Her face went pale. You've been spying on me? No, I said calmly. I've been protecting my family. She looked like she wanted to argue but couldn't find the words. Her fingers fluttered toward the beet juice but didn't lift it. I don't want a war, Sabrina, I continued, voice soft. But I won't be written out of my own story. She said nothing. Just sat there, blinking like she'd missed a plot twist she thought she'd written. We finished the meal mostly in silence, save for the occasional scrape of a fork against wood. I let her sit with the knowledge. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't throw anything. I didn't need to. I'd made my point with bookmarks, with truth, and with one very important folder. The phone rang that night. It was Dylan. Hey, Mom. His voice was quieter than usual, like he was calling from under a quilt or next to someone who was pretending not to listen. Sabrina's upset. She came home really shaken. I didn't respond right away. Just waited like we were sitting across from each other on the old porch swing, waiting for the cicadas to finish buzzing before anyone spoke again. She said you ambushed her, he continued. That you've been spying on her. That you're trying to sabotage our marriage. She says you've always been manipulative, controlling. He left the last word hanging like it was the part he didn't want to say but had to. I took a breath. Do you believe that? He paused. I don't know. Well, I said gently, I have documentation, things I've found, people I've spoken with, but I won't push it on you, Dylan. I'll only show you if you want the full story, not the version with filters and flattering angles. He didn't answer right away. I just need time. I told him that was fine. I meant it too. Sometimes truth needs to marinate a while before it's edible. A week passed. I didn't hear from him. I didn't reach out either. Not because I was being stubborn, but because I've learned when someone's building up the courage to face something difficult, you don't knock on their door while they're still lacing their shoes. Then on a Wednesday evening just before dusk, I heard a car pull up outside. I peeked through the window and nearly dropped my teacup. There he was, my son, standing on my front porch with Lucy in his arms and a diaper bag slung over his shoulder. No suitcase, no overnight gear. Just the look of a man who'd finally admitted the math wasn't adding up. I opened the door. I think I've made a mistake, he said. I didn't say I told you so. I didn't say anything, really. I just stepped aside and let them in. Lucy was already half asleep, her little head resting on his shoulder, her hand curled around a corner of his flannel shirt. I took her gently and brought her to the spare room, what used to be Dylan's room, back when he had glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling and posters of vintage airplanes on the walls. The stars were still there. Dylan and I sat at the kitchen table. I made tea. He didn't touch his. We talked. He asked questions, not all at once but slowly in circles like someone working up to a difficult chapter. I didn't push. I just answered when he asked. He told me about the things that had felt off but that he'd ignored. How Sabrina had started limiting who could visit. How she managed everything, appointments, finances, even what photos got posted and which ones disappeared the next day. By the end of the night, he looked exhausted. Not the kind of tired you fix with a nap, the kind that comes from carrying doubt in your chest for too long. He rubbed his temples and said, "Would it be okay if we stayed here for a while?" I reached across the table, covered his hand with mine and said, "Of course. You're home." 3 months after Dylan and Lucy came through my front door, Dylan filed for separation. He didn't do it out of anger or spite. That's not who he is. He did it with the quiet steadiness of someone who's finally seen the forest and the trees. There weren't any fireworks or slammed doors. No dramatic ultimatums. Just a man who'd realized he was living a life someone else had choreographed for him, and that he missed dancing to his own tune. To my surprise, Sabrina didn't fight it. She barely responded, other than to sign what needed signing and issue a few half-hearted requests about Lucy's routine. I suspect she realized pushing back would have meant those tidy little secrets she tucked into corners would come spilling into the daylight. And she didn't want that, not with lawyers and witnesses involved. She was smart enough to fold her hand, even if she'd spent years bluffing. Meanwhile, our lives here settled into something beautiful. Lucy took her first steps right in my kitchen, wobbly, determined little stomps between the counter and the pantry door, arms flailing like a wind-up toy. Dylan and I cheered like we were watching the Super Bowl. I still keep one of her tiny socks from that day in my desk drawer, for no reason other than it makes me smile every time I see it. Dylan started helping out at the stores again, just a few shifts here and there. Mostly at the main location, stocking shelves and chatting with customers. People were so happy to see him back they brought cookies. He's quiet, still sorting through it all, but there's color in his face again, humor in his voice. He's even started humming while he works, something he used to do when he was little and building Lego castles on the living room floor. Every Sunday we make pancakes, the same cinnamon spice kind Frank used to make. Lucy helps by flinging blueberries at the dog, and occasionally stirring the batter with an enthusiasm that has nothing to do with accuracy. I let her. A crooked pancake is still a pancake. Sabrina sent a birthday card for Lucy a few weeks ago. It arrived in a stiff cream envelope, sealed with one of those wax stamps like she's auditioning for the role of Duchess of Regret. The card itself was tasteful. The message? I hope one day you'll see I did what I thought was right. Maybe she did. People tell themselves all kinds of things so they can look in the mirror. But just because someone thought they were doing right doesn't mean they get to write the ending. I didn't show Dylan the card. Not to hide anything, but because that wasn't her story to tell anymore. Lucy's going to grow up surrounded by books, love, and a family that doesn't measure affection in control or approval lists. She'll know where she came from. Not the filtered version, but the real one, full of messy love and quiet strength, and a grandmother who will always show up.
Share your thoughts in the comments. What's your favorite way to protect your peace when family drama heats up? If you liked the story, subscribe to the channel and give us a like.